Maverick News, the antivirus program for your mind. And now, the Freedom Reporters.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Walker. This is the Maverick News channel, and we have a lot of exciting stuff to share with you tonight, some important stuff, and we have a special guest Freedom Reporter, Ian Nunn, a good friend of mine, and a blogger and researcher and Freedom Reporter, will be joining us very shortly here on the broadcast. He has been doing some fairly extensive research into the Ukrainian conflict, and he's going to share that information with us and offer his insight and analysis. And I'm looking forward to getting the comments from all of you tonight as well. And if you have questions for Ian, I'm sure that he would be pleased to field those and offer his opinions and perspectives. And I'm sure that he'd be interested in what you have to say as well. So I'm looking forward to that. He should be here momentarily, actually. I think he's going to sign on probably around 6:10, 6:15, somewhere in that range. So we won't have to wait very long to get started with Ian. And what we can do is kind of get caught up, I think, on what is happening in Ukraine, and the information that we have currently is that Ukrainian authorities say that Russia's military bombed an art school sheltering about 400 people in Mariupol, and there are apparently battles taking place out on the streets. Now, I have to caution you that the information we're getting is coming from wire services and primarily North American, US, Canadian news services, mainstream news services at this point with regard to these stories. So take this information with a grain of salt, because we don't have another side or another perspective on some of this information. Honestly, it doesn't really look to me like Ukraine is, well, it looks like Russia is gaining ground, and it looks like Russia is ramping things up and escalating their response to the Ukrainian resistance. So we've now been into this for about 3 weeks, and Western governments and analysts on this side say they see the conflict shifting to a war of attrition. They say Russian forces are bogged down, launching long-range missiles at cities and military bases, while Ukrainian forces carry out what they're calling hit-and-run attacks that seek to sever supply lines. Again, that's the information we're getting from the US, Canadian mainstream media. So Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, he says, however, that he's ready to talk. And he says in his latest address that if talks fail, as far as he can see, it will result in World War III. So let's bring up Zelensky's most recent comments, and then we'll get a little bit of perspective on where he's coming from, and we'll try to analyze a little bit of this together.
Всім. Зазвичай в такі дні ми говорили, прийшла весна. А зараз говоримо, війна прийшла.
War has come, he says.
Але все одно ми
He
точно
says they'll
всіх
definitely defeat everyone no matter
переможемо.
what.
Тому що ми
because we are
Вільні
free
народи
people of a free
вільної
country.
країни. Це воєнний злочин.
This
Вони
is a
за
war
це
crime, he
будуть
says. They will be held
відповідати. 100%.
accountable for this.
Кожен
100%.
російський
Every Russian
діяч, який
figure who gives such
віддає такі
orders and
накази, і кожен
every
російський солдат, який
Russian soldier
виконує
who
такі
carries out
накази,
such orders will
буде
be identified
встановлений і отримує
and will
примусовий
receive a
квиток в
compulsory
один
one-way
кінець
ticket to the
у Гаагу.
Hague.
Тому переговори
Therefore,
про мир,
negotiations on
про
peace, he says,
безпеку для
and
нас,
security for us,
про
for Ukraine,
безпеку для
meaningful,
України, вони змістовні,
fair and without
чесні,
delay,
без
are the only
затягування. Це
chance for
єдиний шанс для Росії зменшити шкоду
to reduce the
від
damage
власних
from its own
помилок.
mistakes.
Ми завжди наполягали на переговорах, ми
We've always
завжди
insisted on
пропонували
negotiations. He
діалог,
says they've always
пропонували
offered
рішення
dialogue,
для миру не
offered
тільки
solutions for
протягом
peace, not
23
only during
днів
23 days
вторгнення.
of
І
invasion.
я хочу, щоб мене
He says he
зараз
wants everyone to hear me now,
всі,
especially in
почули,
Moscow.
особливо в Москві. Настав час
It's time to meet,
зустрічатись,
time to talk,
час говорити, настав час
it's time to
відновлювати
restore
територіальну
territorial integrity
цілісність
and
і
justice for
справедливість для
Ukraine.
України. Інакше втрати Росії
Otherwise,
будуть
Russia's
такими, що вам
losses will be
не
so
вистачить і
huge
кількох
that several
поколінь, щоб
generations will not be
підняти.
enough to rebuild. So that's pretty tough talk coming from a guy who has been begging for help from all of the NATO countries, Canada included. I'm interested in hearing from you guys. What do you think? Angel Hood says, don't believe Canadian news. They are holding the truth and lie. Shirley says, put your boots on, boys. The mainstream media is at it again, spewing BS again. Amoki Pekin. Yeah, Luya, shut your mouth. Pete tripped over Russell, says Zelensky just mad because Obama came first, made his eyes burn from. Oh, okay. Okay. Valerie Warkajar. Zelensky is a bad actor and deplorable. Maple Leaf says prophecy says Russia might attack all of Europe. Let's give it time and see. I doubt it. I don't think so. And I don't think Zelensky is really in a position right now, honestly, my opinion, to be talking tough at all. What I'm seeing is a guy who is losing ground every day. And even though he's getting weapons and money from NATO countries, I don't see how he can win this unless NATO escalates and gets directly involved. Karen Ouellette says Canada has 5 flintlocks and 2 canoes. What help? I think the one canoe is in for service because I'm not. I think it was leaking, so I'm not even sure about that. Rosemary McIntyre says Zelensky is dangerous, and yeah, I agree. I think that he's digging in his heels, and he says he wants to negotiate, wants talks. I don't see that. I know that they've already had talks. I think this address that he just gave within the last 24 hours is a bunch of window dressing. It's acting. It doesn't make sense to me what he's saying. We know that they had negotiations. There were representatives from both sides that had been meeting, and there was some hope that there might be some progress there, but nothing seems to have come of that. Now he's standing up saying it's time for talks. Well, you just had talks. Russia laid out its demands. They were very clear. They're the same as they've been from the very beginning. They're the same as they've essentially been for the past 8 years. Demilitarize, denazify. They want the Nazis out. They want all those Nazi battalions gone. And they want Ukraine to be a neutral country, not part of NATO, not controlled by the West, independent. And they want those 2 areas that want independence in Ukraine to have their independence. So that's pretty clear. And I don't think the Russians are going to back down on those points. And if Zelensky is prepared to talk about that, I think he'll still have a country, and he might even save himself. But he keeps digging in, talks stuff like that. The Russians are just they've already started to escalate things, and I think that's kind of where we're at the moment. Rosanna Enns Cron says hi there. Well, hello back. And Ian has joined us, and there he is. Good evening, Ian. How are you tonight?
I'm fine, Rick. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm just fine. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm looking forward to the conversation with you. Lots of people in the message area here chiming in and providing some feedback. So we'll be kind of chatting back and forth with the people watching a little bit. Ian has his he's our guest freedom reporter tonight, and he has a blog or an online website called The Poog. Can you tell the viewers a little bit about that, Ian, and maybe a little bit about yourself as well?
Excuse me. Well, I'm a retired computer scientist. I've got a master's in computer science. I did work in the federal government and retired early, went back to school, did 6 years of graduate work at Carleton, and eventually completed all the requirements for a PhD except a dissertation. So the significance, I think, of that is that I've done graduate research. I have a couple of peer-reviewed papers that are published out there somewhere in the vast unknown. I know how to read scientific papers, and when I do research, that's the level I try to go down to. I started a blog about over 10 years ago, trying to get to the bottom of things which just in the media weren't making sense. And I think the perception of, there's the current incarnation of the blog right there. It's called Fault Lines. And I chose to identify critical areas that I thought were important to focus research under. And one is the area of economic issues. The biggest one is what I call the New World Order, and that's all of the activity that's going on directing the way our world is unfolding. So as I talk, Rich is paging through a little bit of stuff there. I estimate there's well over 2,000 hours of research written up here on a large number of topics. And some of the topics, the menu items are layered several layers deep. So it's a bit of a trick to navigate the site, but you can find all sorts of stuff there.
There are a lot of deep dives in there. We have our boy Prime Minister, Mr. Socks, Justin Trudeau, with Agenda 2030. There is a lot to dig into here on a lot of topics that I know would be of extreme interest to all of our viewers, everyone here in the Maverick Multimedia family. I mean, we're talking about the New World Order.
So, Rick, if I can ask you, go to the New World Order and come down to strategies. I can't
solutions.
Read
UN agenda, elites, strategies behind the
okay. So pause the mouse there and look across. COVID-19.
Yep.
Okay. There's all the.
I should caution you. We are on YouTube, so we have to be very careful about what we say with regard to anything C-19.
I understand. So this was a topic of interest that's developed over the last couple of years. very controversial in some areas. And what I chose to do is more for my own edification to try and understand what some of the issues were. And I hate doing research and not capturing it because it's work I've expended and I don't like throwing work away. So some of this stuff is work in progress and it will always remain so. Some of it was done over a year ago, so it's older and hasn't been updated. But the key issues, I believe, are there. And it's anybody who wants to get some of the scientific background on many of these topics, that's what I focus on. I go to the original papers published in scientific journals and I cite them and I give quotes from them that are relevant to the theme that I'm developing. So probably that's enough that I need to say right there.
Sure. Well, we have a special broadcast coming up. We haven't set the date yet, but we'll be digging into all of those Pfizer documents, the thousands of pages that were released. We're going to have to do that over on Rumble. I think pretty much exclusively. We'll probably start on YouTube and then just tell everybody to go over to the other channel where where we won't get taken down immediately.
Yeah.
But there is a wealth of information right there on COVID, and anybody that would like to check that out, I'm sure that you'll find a lot of useful information, because I know Ian has just spent countless hours digging into this over the last couple of years. So,
and I'm open to discussion with anybody who wants to talk about any issues. If anybody wants to try and convince me that I'm wrong, I'm not interested particularly in talking with them, unless it's a truly open discussion, because otherwise you can just spend too much bandwidth on something that's fruitless.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I understand. I understand completely. But man, there's a lot right in there alone. So there's COVID. I mean, and you even get into like psychology, propaganda, and censorship, which is a topic that we'll be touching on tonight, because we're going to dig into what's going on in Ukraine. And of course, we're dealing with propaganda on both sides. Conspiracy theories.
That particular category of psyops, psychological operations, is arguably the most important category in the site, because in it it gives you the background of all of the stuff that's being used currently against you. So go through there. That's a fun one.
Yeah, and I would say that the techniques they're using have been refined to a level that is unprecedented.
That's right.
And these methods obviously have been incredibly effective. I think we've had the biggest psyop in human history over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
It's still in progress.
Yes, it is. It is. Every time I go out and I'm in among other humans, I look around and, oh yeah, there's a lot of mind control out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Climate change. There's a tab here called stuff.
It's where I couldn't figure out to put things. There's only a limited amount of screen space that I've got for menus and stuff, and so I just put weird stuff in there. If you poke around, you'll find I got a wide range of interests.
Yeah, even parapsychology and UFOs, which I've always found that stuff fascinating. Of course, some of it is entertainment, but there is some truth to it, and we've even seen the U.S. military admit within the last year or so that there are things that they just aren't sure what they were.
Yeah.
which is
Even as a
alarming.
teenager, I subscribed to the British UFO Journal, the British UFO Association Journal. And I also had a subscription to the Journal of Parapsychology at Duke University at that time because I was interested enough. And the main research into parapsychology back in the 50s and 60s, I'm a bit of a fossil here, was being conducted at Duke. So I went right to the source.
And economics.
Yeah,
Another big area.
It's not very well developed, but it's I spend a lot of personal time in that area.
Yeah. And of course, all of this, every subject in here, I think one way or another ties back into what we're looking at specifically tonight, which is this situation in Ukraine. And I know you've been doing some research in that area since this, even before this conflict began with Russia going in there and mounting this operation.
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly sure where to begin with all of that. We've been discussing this at length here some nights. We had, I think one of the top experts, a former U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer and former UN weapons inspector, Scott Ritter, on 2 nights ago. And he was incredible. Very, very knowledgeable. One of the top experts in the world. It was very gracious of him to spend some time with us. He was on with us for 3 hours, and
wow.
Really laid things out in a way that you're not getting in the mainstream media. I think it was pretty much straight up, and not really in alignment with a lot of what we're getting from the mainstream media. But I'm also interested in hearing what your perspectives are. And I think what your views are somewhat in alignment with Professor John Mearsheimer, who, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that was kind of the impression I got from what I was reading.
Yes, that would be the case.
So maybe take us back and maybe start closer to the beginning of all of this, and give me your view on what do you think really led up to this, because that's a question I don't think the media has really dealt with adequately.
I'll go sideways. I always go sideways when I'm thinking. So if I ask you what was the cause of World War I, the common response was, well, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, but he was just a guy, okay, a somewhat important guy. Yeah, he got shot, okay, but lots of people were getting shot around that time. Nowadays, people are getting shot all the time. So what's the big deal? The point is that there was a massive buildup of, I'll call it tension, competing interests and stuff like that, that had its antecedents going back 10 years, 20 years, 200 years. I mean, Europe has been a very volatile piece of real estate over the centuries. The boundaries have changed all the time, unlike North America, where our boundaries were pretty well always being fixed. But there were countries were coming and going and getting absorbed and broken up and stuff. And it continues on to this day. So the coming up to the Ukraine, you really need a little bit of background as to what the Ukraine really is. The Ukraine today, the map has been drawn many times over the last 100 years. Parts of it would have been in Russia, as it's known today. Case in point, Crimea. I think the Russians conquered Crimea. My guess would be from the Ottomans, say 200 years ago, and it had always been part of Russia until Khrushchev Khrushchev was, I understand, a Ukrainian, gave it to Ukraine as a protectorate, to take care of. But until then, it had been part of Russia, and it has a large Russian-speaking population, as does the entire Donbass region. So you have to look back at how these areas, these regions evolved, and to understand where some of the tensions are coming from. I mean, the Russian parts of it are naturally very pro-Russian, and the pure Ukrainian parts, well, in some respects today are very anti-Russians. And so you have this dynamic inside one country that is unfolding. Well,
the country is very divided. You have these anti-Russian Ukrainians in the West. You have more pro-Russian and even Russian-speaking Ukrainians in the East. And the country is divided. You basically have a civil war in two of those areas where they're demanding independence. Russia has promised to protect them, and Zelensky has been bombing them, and he's killed over 14,000 people in those areas. Yeah. And that's something else that the media here in Canada and the US, well, in the West, they're not reporting any of that. So that's a complicating factor in all of this.
Yeah, I have a couple of recordings on my site of, this is in the blog section, of interviews with people in the Ukraine, particularly in the Donbass region, talking about what life has been like that for the last 6 or
well, it's really reached a boiling point over the last 8 years, and then we've got this whole NATO issue, which has really been at the focal point for Putin.
Yeah, and that's the critical thing, because I characterize NATO as the foreign legion of the American empire, and when the Soviet Union broke up, there was a meeting between the East and the West, and there was a written, I don't think it was a written agreement, but there was an agreement that NATO would not expand beyond the original 13 countries. And the USSR, well, at that point was breaking up, but Russia would not attempt to come forward. They wanted a neutral buffer zone, and those would be the countries like Poland, Hungary, Romania, Czechoslovakia. But over the years, and particularly I think it began under Clinton, NATO expansion began in earnest. And now the number of countries in NATO is larger than the original 13. And in some cases, they go right up to the Russian border. That would be Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. And Ukraine is the key thing. So picture this. If you're old enough, excuse me, if you're old enough to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, the U.S. wanted to put missiles in Turkey. The Russians said, "Okay, we're putting missiles in Cuba," and they brought them over. And Kennedy said, "Okay, this is the red line in the sand for us. You put missiles there, and we're going to take them out, and we're going to take you out if we have to. There are no missiles going to go there. We can't have an enemy force like that stationed that close to our homeland." Well, if you go to the map, the most eastern part of Ukraine is 280 miles from Moscow, and it's about the same for Leningrad and their other major cities. So think about reversing the situation. And can Russia tolerate a foreign enemy force, NATO, 280 miles from Moscow? And they said, no, this is an existential threat. I mean, that's 5 minutes by a missile to completely wiping everything out. So they will not allow it. Putin has made it very clear for years that Ukraine under NATO influence is a no-go, but NATO has been pushing forward, and the U.S. in particular, with the through the State Department, through the CIA, has been training and arming the Ukrainian militias, especially the Azov Brigade, the neo-Nazi brigade in Ukraine, and they're just putting more and more pressure on Russia to the point where Putin said, "Okay, this is it. If you won't listen to us, I'm acting. I'm going to go in there. We're going to clean it up. We will create a neutral buffer state in the Ukraine, which is what we have asked for and which you have not done. The Minsk agreement, which they were part of, I believe, has not been honored. So, and that was to achieve that, as I understand it. So that's to me the background. The instigation of this is not Russia, but this is the Russian security response to ever increasing pressure from the West.
Yes, and that is something that largely has been ignored by the media in the West.
Oh yeah.
The narrative we're getting is simply that Putin is a madman, a megalomaniac who wants to restore the former Soviet Union into its former glory and reconstitute it. And it's a good thing that we have expanded NATO, because if we haven't, he would be probably rolling into the middle of Germany right now. So that's sort of the story we're getting. But there's, it's a war, and there's a lot of cheerleading going on, and nobody is on either side, I don't think, is really telling us the truth. So, but I think that's a fairly accurate portrayal of the background that you've provided.
Yeah, what I did is in my blog, I have a series of about 6 blog articles and background information on the Ukraine. And I chose not to pay any attention to the mainstream or legacy media on either side. In other words, I don't listen to CBC or CTV or any of the American news media sources. On the Russian side, I don't listen to RT or Sputnik. What I'm looking for are independent sources that think independently or have independent contacts within the Ukraine where they can actually get some real information out. And so I've put together probably 12 hours worth of videos and articles that will give anybody who wants to go through it, I believe, a really balanced understanding of the background forces operating here, the economic forces, the political forces, the historical forces, the strategic issues at stake here, with good diagrams showing how the threat is perceived by Russia and so on. So it's there if somebody wants to take the time.
And I think you do have some videos and some reference material directly connected to Professor Mearsheimer, who I think is brilliant, and I share your affection for him and his work. And he's not afraid to, I think, speak his mind and give his perspective, even when it might not be in line with the mainstream media. And he hasn't really changed his views over the last decade on this, I would say. He's been
Yeah.
very consistent. And the background you just laid out is pretty much the story that he tells as well. And I think that it's fairly accurate. I think it's right on the money, actually. And I think it's very much in line with what Scott Ritter had to say two nights ago with us as well. So, you can kind of see that there is a path to truth if you're willing to look at all sides and take in as much information as you can get, and then start to try to weed out the propaganda from the facts.
Yeah. Just as a reference, if you go to the blog section of my website and look for a recent blog called "A Summary of Ukraine Background Information," it actually has the video of John Mearsheim in it, along with another one, and it has links to 5 other articles in the series, and each article gives a certain aspect of background, including one that is rather interesting. It came to me from a friend. It's a video produced by a Canadian woman goes under the name of Amazing Polly, and she relates all of the research she did digging into the connections between the Ukrainian community in Canada to the Ukraine and through George Soros. So there's some interesting background there that I don't think appears anywhere else. So that's captured in that list of references too.
And I put your website URL up there, thepoog.com, and that will take you directly to Ian's website where you can find his information. But don't go there now. Stay here because we're still talking.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I'll put that back up on the screen for all you folks later as well, so that you'll be reminded when we get closer to the end of the broadcast tonight. So
go ahead.
So that's kind of the background. And we have some live video feeds from Ukraine up on the screen. It doesn't look like there's a lot happening at the moment in terms of any kind of missile strikes or explosions or anything like that. So that's good. I'm glad to see that there seems to be a little bit of calm, but it has not been good for the people there. I think we're now up over 3.5 million people, if I'm not mistaken, have apparently fled. There was a flash there. I don't know what that was. It might have been just snow or a bug. But yeah, a lot of people being displaced, heading to the borders. We're seeing a mass movement of people, and it's been troubling, terrible to see this. It's the Ukrainian people paying the biggest price. So with that kind of background laid out, where do you think we're at the moment, Ian? Any idea? Any thoughts on that? I know that we just ran a statement from Zelensky, who says that he's ready for talks. If they don't succeed, he thinks we're looking at World War III, but he's talking tough to the Russians, sort of laying out almost like an ultimatum. It's like, if you don't talk to us, we're basically going to destroy you. And I think I don't get it myself. Regardless of the information we're getting from the Western media, I think that he's losing, and losing badly. I think that the Russians have been methodical. I don't think that they're interested in occupying Ukraine. I think that they just want to keep NATO out of there, and they want to destroy these Nazi battalions because they want to, as Putin says, denazify Ukraine. He wants the Azov battalion taken out. He wants these neo-Nazi groups taken out. He sees them as a serious threat.
Yeah.
And I just think his objective is to keep NATO out and keep Ukraine a neutral country. I don't think he wants to occupy Ukraine at all. I think the media is portraying this all wrong.
They are for very deliberate reasons. They want to make this him look as an aggressor who is power mad and ready to take over Europe. All he wants is a neutral buffer between him and NATO.
Yes. A couple of things with regard to that. This narrative that we're getting from the media obviously is being pushed by governments here, Canada and the United States, NATO. So I have to wonder, what is their true objective? And if their objective is to, the only reason they can be pushing this, if we know that Putin really just wants to keep it neutral, we know that that's likely the case, then his assertion that NATO wants to westernize and control Ukraine, and they already have. Zelensky is basically a puppet of the West.
He is.
And the NATO has been training the Ukrainian troops, so they're already NATOized. They're not a full-fledged member.
Mm-hmm.
But it's pretty clear to me that the West and NATO actually do want to control Ukraine and get a strong foothold in there so that they can be right up in Putin's grill, to be right up in it, right in his face. They've got objectives, and I'm worried about that because he's not going to let them.
No, Putin, he's, from my perspective, he's a pretty straightforward guy. He said right from the beginning where the red line was for him. And he hasn't changed that, and he hasn't backed down. And the West decided to call his bluff, and this is the result. He said, essentially, if you're not going to give me the security configuration that I can live with, then I'm going to have to go and build it myself. And Russia is not a particularly wealthy country. You look at its GDP, it is somewhat down from the top. It does not have the economic resources to wage a war to take over Europe. Not a chance. So anybody who's thinking like that has taken too many stupid pills in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, that can't be his objective. He doesn't have the resources.
No,
it makes no sense.
So he's been very clear. He wants a neutral Ukraine, and he will get it however he has to do to go about it and get it. And achieving that, that's his goal. And in the process, he will keep Crimea, the two independent republics now, states that have been created that he's recognized will remain that. And that is, there is some discussion in the material that I have up as to whether he may keep a corridor along the Black Sea, because there is a Russian territory on the other side of Ukraine, I think. I forget what it's called, that he might like to link up with. But
somebody says that flash I saw was a missile. Very well may have been. Sorry, go ahead, Ian. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So another issue is that, well, people say, well, why is the fighting still going on? He supposedly had the strength to go in and crush Ukraine in 3 or 4 days. And the fact that he hasn't is evidence that he's losing badly. He's bogged down. He's losing the war. that's the Western strategy that or perspective that's being put forward. But there's another strategy which is being put forward, and I think it's the correct one. And he does not want to take the American approach. You go in and you bomb the H out of the cities in the country you're attacking, and once they're leveled, you just walk in and mop up. He's going in and very methodically trying to eliminate the active opposition at the least cost in terms of civilian lives and material damage. And you have those two scenarios. Either he's incompetent and he's mismanaged this and he's totally failing because the thing isn't over, or he's being very careful, going through very carefully to avoid casualties and collateral damage. And I think it's the latter. And I think that will be proven out in the end. And that's why I think this will go on for another 2-3 months. But
you think it will? You think it will go on that long?
Unless the West does something stupid.
Well, that's entirely possible. In fact, I think they've done some stupid things already.
Like decide to impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine. And he's made it very clear, you do that, shoot down one of our aircraft, and we will take out the base that that aircraft came from, no matter whose territory it's on. So, yeah, the West could do any number of things that could essentially preempt World War III. And there are people that argue that that's the goal. They want World War III. So yeah. The World Economic Forum in particular is the principal protagonist in this.
Yes, and that's what petrifies me, because not only are we talking about the possibility of World War III, there are hawks out there who seem to think that a limited scale tactical nuclear war is also a feasible thing. And I think that's freaking insane.
No, the geography isn't made for that. The principal cities in Moscow are too close to the rest of Europe. If Putin is cornered in any way, he will go nuclear. And yeah, he will take out Brussels, get rid of NATO. He will take out Berlin and get rid of those pesky Germans who are a thorn in his side. He'd probably take out London. He'll take hits in the meantime, but he will also take out New York, Washington, and any number of American cities. And that's, I think, what the neocons in the US are not factoring in. I think they're sitting back there thinking, oh, well, we have superior defenses and whatever. We can defend ourselves against this. But if it goes to World War III, it will be global nuclear, and the US is going to take it as hard as anyone else.
And we're seeing escalation because we keep sending weapons and money. And I'd like to run this video of these Switchblade drones that the U.S. is sending, just to give everybody a sense of what they really are. Let's just watch this video from the manufacturer of these Switchblade 300 loitering missiles. These are drones. So they're very small. So they're hard to see. They have a very small thermal and acoustic footprint signature. They're a precision weapon. And they can abort the mission if directed to do so. And the positions are triangulated using a surveillance drone. They can be deployed really from anywhere, even submarines. These were developed by the same company that built the helicopter that went to Mars. So there you have it. Those are the Switchblade drones.
Yeah.
I find all that stuff chilling.
Yeah, the West, the U.S. and in particular, but Britain, Germany, have been sending more and more advanced munitions into Ukraine. And at some point, I don't know how Putin is going to respond to this. At some point, he may have said that's enough. I don't know what he'll do, but.
Well, we did see the first use of a hypersonic missile. I think that's sort of his response right now, because he used this hypersonic missile. Let's bring that up and show you how that went, to take out a munitions depot. Let's roll this back. Here it is. This is supposed to be footage of the hypersonic missiles as on route to target. Watch this.
Вот ебать это пизда нахуй! Ебать!
Yeah.
Вот ебать это пизда нахуй! Ебать!
So that's what Vladimir Putin thinks of sending weapons to Ukraine. And the Pentagon says they have not confirmed the use of that weapon, but Russia says they did use it. And I believe it. I think they did.
Well, the U.S. has used the Middle East for a long time for testing advanced weapon systems. And there's no reason why the Russians might not want to see, well, we've got this thing now. Let's see how it works.
Right.
Makes sense.
And a munitions dump is the perfect target.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to point out something, go sideways a bit to make another observation. And that is, I've been amazed at the extent that the West, the population in the West has been absolutely, virtually 100% polarized against Russia. to the ridiculous things. There is a World Cat Association of some kind that sets up the worldwide competitions where cat owners take their cats for best of breed and things like that.
Yes.
And they outlawed the Russian breed.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Putin went down on his knees hearing that one. But what kind of idiocy is this? In Canada, there was that Russian pianist, 20-year-old prodigy. He was scheduled to play, was it in Montreal? And they canceled him. There was I think, a ballerina at one of the arts forms in Canada. She was canceled. I mean, what is going on?
Well, it's the cats that are suffering most now. The poor cats.
Yeah.
The cats are the victims. Look at those poor kitty cats. And there's a poor Russian dog. He's being discriminated against too. But it's ridiculous what they're doing. And it's like, the media, our government, they make it okay to hate certain things and certain people at certain times.
Yeah.
And right now they're making it, it's fashionable to hate Russians and Russian cats and Russian vodka and Russians in general. And we've seen actually that hate taken out on restaurant owners, business owners, Russian hockey players booed when they're on the ice in the NHL. Some of them concerned they might lose their visas and might not be able to stay and continue to play hockey. I just think it's all ridiculous. Have we learned nothing from our history? Did we learn nothing from World War II and the internment of Japanese Canadians? There's so many examples through history, and it's like people just have learned nothing. Our government, Justin Trudeau is the guy who keeps spewing the hate and dividing people like this. It's terrible.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely terrible.
And I expect we'll be hearing cases of, there is a Russian immigrant population, and I'm sure that we're going to hear cases of kids being discriminated at school, beat up because they're Russian, things like that. I'm just waiting for that to come out in the media. Well, maybe the media wouldn't put that out, but
I don't know, but it's very likely, and there will be no sympathy in the media for any of it, because they pick and choose who to defend and who to demonize, right?
When you go into the PSYOP area and you understand how governments now control their populations, and they do it with fear. So we have been through successive stages of fear, the fear of terrorism, and then it went into climate change. We're going to all burn up in 5 years. And then it went into COVID, and COVID's kind of exhausted. And now we're kind of coming back to climate change. And now we've got Russians to hate. So there's always something that's putting forward to create fear in the population. And that's how the government controls this.
Yes, that's exactly right. Here's some footage from the Azov battalion, Ukraine drone footage showing the destruction to Mariupol as Russian forces continue bombardment. You tell me, does this look like Ukraine is winning? Our media, and this was released apparently by the neo-Nazi, and I don't even call them neo-Nazi because they've been around a long time, by the Nazi battalion, the Azov battalion, which is part of the Ukrainian military now. Yeah. And this doesn't look like Ukraine's winning to me.
No, and the other thing is that the devastation is nothing compared to the pictures of devastation in the Middle East, in Iraq, and in Syria, in the areas that the United States chose to invade.
Right.
There they have whole cities that are leveled. So I think it's consistent with the idea that Putin is trying to minimize the damage to property, to people, civilian casualties.
And would you agree that evidence of that is also that he did not take out communications infrastructure, water filtration? I don't know about that, but I shouldn't say that. But most of the infrastructure remains in place, including communications. Electricity in most places is still on.
Yeah, he took over the nuclear power plants. They're running fine. We didn't mention the U.S. Bioweapons labs that he took out. That's another topic if you want to get into it.
Yeah, we should talk a little bit about that. I think it's important.
Yeah. And okay, I've lost my train, so go ahead.
But it is, would you agree that that's evidence of being, of him going in and using surgical strikes, precision weaponry to minimize collateral damage, because that's been his strategy. It hasn't been a blitzkrieg, go in, level everything, destroy everything. We're hearing in our media that he's been intentionally targeting civilians, bombing hospitals, and there seems to be, we hear that one day, and then within a couple of days we see other reports that show a lot of this is
fake news,
not factual. Yeah. Fake news, if you will.
Yeah.
Propaganda.
Well, you see, if he wants a functional neutral Ukraine, which is his ideal, it's got to be functional. So the infrastructure has got to be there. He doesn't want to level the place and then have to go in and at his expense rebuild the infrastructure. The strategy would be keep all the key infrastructure intact that you can while achieving your objectives. I mean, that's the thing that makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. And he's a smart, sensible man, unlike most of the leaders in the West.
Yeah, and it's not that we're trying to apologize for him here at all, because he can be as brutal as any of them, and has been. But I think he lives in a different world than we do.
Yeah.
And has a different reality and a different set of needs to survive as the leader of Russia. I think when you're in a position like that, you face a multitude of different threats. So it's easy to sit back and criticize, I suppose. But I think you understand where I'm coming from on that.
Yeah.
What do you think of the aid that we are sending? Canada has sent over, about $500 million in money, and night vision goggles, munitions, guns. The United States sent those drones, is sending those drones. They've pulled back on sending the MiGs, apparently from Poland, and then backfilling. Do you think that does this make any sense to you?
Not in any rational way. If you're intent on creating a situation which is trying to make it intolerable for Putin, yes, do all of this and do it carefully so that he doesn't have cause to take out Ottawa, for instance, with a nuclear device. So,
yeah, well, if we see escalation,
I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know. I don't see how it's going to wind down. Because the U.S. is stoking the fire. That's the problem. The U.S. principally, but the West. Britain is bad. Yeah.
I honestly, Ian, I that's the thing I don't really get. Does like why are they that overconfident? Are they that stupid? Do they really think like I'm listening to US politicians stand up, including like people like Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, they're all rattling the saber, right?
Yeah.
And they're talking about we need to give them, if and I'm not quoting those two politicians specifically, but we're hearing things from the politicians down there in general and here in Canada. We need to give them whatever they need to win. To win. And I just don't see that going anywhere good. There is an exit ramp to peace. We can see it. We see the demands, and I don't even see a downside, honestly, for Ukraine in being a neutral country.
No.
Okay, they're a neutral country. They maintain their sovereignty. They can even remain a democracy. I don't see the downside. So I don't get this, except that the West is just determined to get in there for whatever reason, either just to piss them off or to have a foothold or maybe their goal is even more than that. It could be that they want to go into Russia and have regime change there. Some of these people, I'm sure that's got to be in the back of their mind, some of these neocons. And they've been meddling in Ukraine for decades.
Yeah. And I've heard calls to that effect that some parties are now demanding regime change in Russia.
See, that's where I think that's insane. This is not Iraq. This is not Libya.
Yeah.
This is not some small country that they can just run roughshod over. This is a nuclear power. And I think we're in a lot of danger.
And the thing is, with all of these sanctions, what they've done is they have drawn the Russian people behind Putin. They've unified them. I think Putin's popularity rating is, 60 or 80% or something like that, as opposed to the people like Trudeau and Biden who are battling for single-digit ratings.
Yeah. Well, this would be a good time, I think, to mention that we are in an information war, and that's what we're doing here. We're trying to get people closer to the truth through the work that we're doing. If you can support this channel, you can make donations at freedomreporters.com. We certainly appreciate the support we have had, and we do need your help. We do finally have a phone system, a call-in phone system that we're setting up right now, and it should be operational for this coming week so that we can engage all of you out there in a more meaningful way and have people phoning in to participate, not just in the chat, but in actual conversation with us here on the program as well. So that's just one of many things that we're doing here to expand our coverage and improve the broadcasts every night. And that's what the donations are being used for, is for things like that. And as I say, we're setting that up right now. So I'm really looking forward to that. And again, you can donate at freedomreporters.com, or you can hit the hot links in the YouTube or Facebook descriptions, the hot links there, and on Rumble. And I would really encourage everyone to go over to Rumble and subscribe to our channel on Rumble. In fact, I'll get a link to that channel and I'll put it up here in the comments section so that people can do that, because we need to migrate everybody over to that channel, because someday we're going to say something over here for sure that will take us beyond the warnings we've received and get us banned outright, like all the other honorable social media outlets out there. So go to Rumble and watch us over there. I'll put the link up at some point during the broadcast tonight so everyone can get that. freedomreporters.com. And Ian,
let me speak to this.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't think your viewers have any idea of how precarious their freedoms are. there are topics that we won't touch on tonight that deserve a show on themselves. And I'm telling you that the world is on the brink of losing everything. As the way things are going, in 2 years, you will have no freedom, nothing left. The things are that advanced. So when you have a voice like Rick's speaking out to try and defend your freedom, help him, because it's your freedom that he's fighting for. Yeah, so hit the donation button.
I appreciate that very much, Ian. 25 years I worked at CTV, as you may know, and I thought I was done with this whole news business thing. I just wanted to go and talk about cars and go south where it was warm in the winter.
I
And
just want to retire in peace.
and yeah, and then I got together with some good people and saw what was going on, especially with the Freedom Convoy. And I had this news channel that I'd experimented with some years ago. And there was a bit of a subscriber base there. And I said, we have to do something because free speech, freedom in general, it's all being lost. And we have to do something. So here it is. We brought it back and it caught fire immediately. The subscriber base exploded. And we have thousands of people watching every night now, and it just keeps on growing. And that's because we've had great guests like yourself, like Scott Ritter, Jeremy McKenzie, some incredible stories that we've rolled out here, exposing some of the silliness and some of the dangers that we're facing because of the governments that are leading us. And yeah, our freedom is in peril, and we're exposing that every night here. And I really had to do some soul searching before relaunching this thing, because I'll tell you, this is a big risk. They come after people like us. We're seeing it all the time, and it's not just about getting banned off YouTube. It's not just about being censored. They come after you, and you've seen it with the truckers going after people's bank accounts, freezing assets. And now they have tools in Canada in particular that really allow them to go after you. So we're putting it on the line. And even our viewers here tonight, you're all participating as well. You're doing a good thing just by participating in the conversation and watching. And we appreciate everybody that subscribes. And it all starts with dialogue, and that's what it's all about. We have to keep on talking, and the more they try to shut us down, the more we have to keep on having open dialogue and keeping free speech flowing, and fighting all of these efforts to take it away. So freedomreporters.com is where you can donate. And now back to your regularly scheduled programming. So where were we with all of this and this stuff in Ukraine?
Again, I would urge people to go to that blog post summary of background information, because I deliberately chose information in there that gives you solid background on what's going on there. Stuff that can be verified just by going online and checking, doing a search or whatever. It's nonpartisan, and it's not taking either side particularly. It's just saying this is what has gone on leading up into this situation. Economic issues, as I said before, all of that stuff. So I would encourage you to go through that. It's kind of like a mini history course on the Ukraine, and it will give you a really good understanding of what's behind all this. So continue, Rick.
Yeah, and as I've said before, the United States in particular, NATO in general, but the United States in particular has been meddling in the affairs of Ukraine for a long time. And, what do you have any views on that, Ian? I guess the U.S.
Well,
has a long history in a lot of countries in that regard.
between the CIA and the State Department, they have assassinated more leaders, overthrown more governments than any other institution in the world, going back many decades. And it's what's funny is that eventually these CIA documents get declassified. 50 years later, we get the declassified documents on how they overthrew a government in, I don't know, in Central America somewhere. And I thought once I would write an article on the CIA. And when I started to do research, I found out there is so much material out there on the background of the CIA. I thought, there's no point in my adding to this pile of literature. So if you want to know about the CIA, do a bit of research yourself. It'll really open your eyes. And they have been instrumental in the overthrow of the previous elected government before the one that was currently installed.
Yes, in fact, I have queued up here a video of Victoria Nuland, who I believe works for the Secretary of State, and Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt. This was back in 2014.
Yeah.
And this is them having a conversation. And you won't know who all the names and players are, but this was an actual intercepted phone conversation between the two of them that then made the news cycle at that time. And this is them discussing regime change in Ukraine back in 2014. This is the government that was installed by the CIA, essentially, before Zelensky.
What do you think?
I think we're in play. The Klitschko piece is obviously the complicated electron here, especially the announcement of him as deputy prime minister. And you've seen some of my notes on the troubles in the marriage right now. So we're trying to get a read really fast on where he is on this stuff. But I think your argument to him, which you'll need to make, I think that's the next phone call we want to set up, is exactly the one you made to Yachts. And I'm glad you sort of put him on the spot on where he fits in this scenario. And I'm very glad he said what he said in response.
Good. So I don't think Klitsch should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, they get to choose whoever's going to be in the government.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you think what in terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yachts is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week. I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay. Good. Well, do you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
My understanding from that call, but you tell me, was that the big three were going into their own meeting and that Yachts was going to offer in that context a three-way, the 3+1 conversation or 3+2 with you. Is that not how you understood it?
No, I mean, that's what he proposed, but I think just knowing the dynamic that's been with them where Klitschko has been the top dog. He's going to take a while to show up for whatever meeting they've got. He's probably talking to his guys at this point. So I think you reaching out directly to him helps with the personality management among the three. And it gives you also a chance to move fast on all this stuff and put us behind it before they all sit down and he explains why he doesn't like it.
Okay, good. I'm happy. Why don't you reach out to him and see if he wants to talk before or after?
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Okay, I've now written, one more wrinkle for you, Jeff.
Yeah.
can't remember if I told you this or if I only told Washington this, that when I talked to Jeff Feltman this morning, he had a new name for the UN guy, Robert Seri. Did I write you that this morning?
Yeah, I saw
Okay.
that.
He's now gotten both Seri and Ban Ki-moon to agree that Seri could come in Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, you know, fuck the EU.
No, exactly. And I think we've got to do something to make it stick together, because you can be pretty sure that if it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it. And again, the fact that this is out there right now, I'm still trying to figure out in my mind why Yanukovych did that. But in the meantime, there's a Party of Regions faction meeting going on right now, and I'm sure there's a lively argument going on in that group at this point. But anyway, we could land jelly side up on this one if we move fast. So let me work on Klitschko, and if you can just keep, I think we want to try to get somebody with an international personality to come out here and help to midwife this thing. And then the other issue is some kind of outreach to Yanukovych, but we probably regroup on that tomorrow as we see how things start to fall into place.
So on that piece, Jeff, when I wrote the note, Sullivan's come back to me, VFR, saying you need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick. So
Okay.
Biden's willing.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thanks.
She seems to have a bit of an ego, Victoria Nuland. I think she's one of the most dangerous people in the world.
Oh, I agree. She, as I understand it, was the one who went to Saddam Hussein and more or less gave him the green light to go into Kuwait. And when he went into Kuwait, then it was kind of like, oops, sorry, I lied.
Unbelievable. And she's also the one who, and this is kind of strange, you know, but she's the one who talked about the biolabs.
Yeah,
right.
you got that clip?
Yeah, I'm going to cue that up. She is the one who confirmed that the biolabs that weren't supposed to exist were actually there. So let's bring that clip up. We'll run that again.
Yeah. Can I give a little bit of background?
Sure.
See, the U.S., the intelligence agencies are overseen essentially by the government, Congress, and the Senate, principally Congress. And Congress does have a bit of I'll say a conscience. And when they found out that gain of function research was being done in the at Fort it'll come to me in Maryland, their principal bioweapons research lab, they said shut it down. And so rather than shut it down, and this is where Fauci and company come in, because they were overseeing all of this. What they did is they shipped it off to China for the gain of function research. And that was the critical thing. Gain of function research is the case of taking a virus and making it more infectious, more lethal, to see what you end up with. Ostensibly to develop vaccines against them, so that you've got a vaccine on the shelf if this comes along. That's one side. The other side is make a better bioweapon. So they shipped it off to Wuhan, and the Chinese finished the development of the gain of function on it. And they did that because they couldn't do it on shore. Well, the CIA got into trouble because they were torturing people, and American people don't really like the idea of their government torturing people. And so they said, you got to put a stop to this. So they said, okay, no more torturing people on American soil. So what they did is they set up black sites in the Middle East, and they engage the actors from other countries to do the torturing while they sit in and they watch, and they tell them what they want done and what they should ask and what they're looking for and stuff like that. So they offshore it because it's too dirty to do at home. And this is the case with bioweapons research. They can't do it on their own territory, so they ship it elsewhere, and they have bioweapon labs all over the world. So they have a bunch in the Ukraine, and that's what Rick is queuing up here.
Yeah, so let's let this clip roll. I know that many of you have heard this before, but it blew my mind when I heard it. It blows my mind every time we play it. But let's blow my mind again, and it'll blow your mind too.
Minute left. Let me ask you: does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
Last question. I am certain that the Russians were looking at their reserves as a way to buffer sanctions. Do you know how, now that we've sanctioned the central bank along with others, do we have an idea of what percentage of their reserves are frozen or inaccessible to them?
Virtually all of them are now frozen. You notice that the country's been under currency controls for almost 2 weeks now, and the whole point of putting so many of these top 10 banks under sanctions is to make it impossible for them to get access to their cash in hard currency.
So the good answer would have been, do they have bioweapons research labs there? Or do we have them there? And the preferable answer would have been no. But she didn't say no, which just tells you that the labs that weren't supposed to be there are there.
Yeah, and whether American scientists were working in those labs or whether they were Ukrainian scientists overseen by American scientists is, I don't think we can say at this point. Do you have a map of where those labs were located?
I can look one up.
The reason being is that they're all located along the Russian border. Now, why would you do that? And I've heard reports that what they would do is they were working on things like more infectious cases of the bird flu. And then they would infect a flock of birds that would migrate eastwards and turn them loose and let them go into Russia and spread this particular pathogen that they developed to test it out.
Hang on
So
a second.
I don't think it's disputed that there were U.S. bioweapons labs there now.
No, it's everybody knows it's a fact. It's verified. We know it's true. The real questions are now, why didn't they dispose of these things? Because this stuff was confiscated after the fall of the Soviet Union. And and so there are questions about why did they keep these pathogens around? They weren't supposed to. So the U.S. has a lot of explaining to do, honestly. Will they ever explain it? I don't know.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but at the end of World War II, the U.S. scooped up the German scientists who were doing bioweapons research and rather than putting them on trial, took them back to the States and put them to work at Fort Detrick. That's the weapons lab that I couldn't remember the name of. And I understand they did the same in World War, or with the Japanese, that at the end of the war, they scooped up the Japanese scientists that had been doing the terrible bioweapons experiments and stuff in China, and took them back to Fort Detrick. So rather than prosecuting these guys, they say, hey, these guys might have something we can use. Bring them back here. We'll work with them. And that's a big part of the start of the American bioweapons research.
Yeah, I'm just doing a little graphics work on the fly here. I'll have that map up for you in just one moment. Just have to save it, upload it. I've got it for you. There we go. Come back in here, and we will upload it over here. It's called Biomap. There we go. It's almost there. And it's up. So there's your map. It's a little blurry. Yeah, I believe it's those red dots that are the bioweapons labs. Can you see that, Ian?
Yes, I can. Yeah. So I was not quite correct. There are a couple on close to the Russian border and down in Crimea. There's a bunch near Poland too. I wonder how the Poles feel about that. Strangely, there's none in the middle of the Ukraine. I wonder why they chose to go that way.
Well, as I said, we know that I think most of these were set up originally by when the former Soviet Union was still together. And then after the fall of the Soviet Union, the Americans came into them because they were in Ukraine. So they took them over. But, the thing is, when I first started hearing about this, I thought, no, that's got to be fake news. We wouldn't get into something like that. That's not our style, right? That's too dangerous. We don't do that stuff because we're the good guys. I didn't want to believe it. I thought there's no way that was going to be true. And it is. That's why all along with this whole thing, I keep saying there are no good guys here. It seems like there are only bad guys. I don't think the Russians are good guys here, but I don't think we're the good guys either. It seems like we're playing some dirty pool as well, especially the Americans. And even with Canadian universities, I think that Canada has its fingers into a lot of nasty things too, because we're in so tight with the U.S. I'm so disappointed, and I'm disillusioned. I'm sorry to say it. I really am. I think I've lost I didn't think I had much innocence to lose, but what little I had left, I think it's gone now too, because of this.
I've been working with this stuff for so long that I didn't bat an eye.
Surprise you?
No,
Yeah.
nothing.
I guess I was still naive.
Well, you grow up fast.
Yeah, this particular stuff, I thought this was just propaganda, and no. So yeah, I'm sorry, folks, but I'm having a really hard time getting on board with the cheerleading and the let's go to war bandwagon, because I don't see the justification. I don't see how we have any moral high ground. I don't see how we can justify preaching to Russia when we've been doing stuff like this. I don't see how Justin Trudeau can stand up legitimately and claim that we need to fight for democracy when he's targeting his political opponents with the Emergencies Act or the War Measures Act, freezing people's bank accounts, throwing his political opponents in jail, sending in cops to beat up peaceful protesters in Ottawa.
Mhm.
And then he turns around and preaches about democracy and freedom and says we have to listen to people on all sides when he won't listen to anyone. And if this thing escalates, who's he going to ask to go fight? Your kids,
That's right.
your sons and daughters. Will his kids go? I doubt it. Will his kids go to Ukraine to fight? They're a little young yet. They're a little bit young. But a lot of people are dying, and he's been eager to send more weapons. We can't even equip our own military properly, and he's sending night vision goggles and munitions, guns, and we're seeing we've seen that some of the weapons that we've sent over have wound up in the wrong hands, in the hands of gangsters, organized crime figures. It's resulted in shootings in the streets over there because they've been arming civilians, and some of those civilians are criminals. And we've seen, I saw stories even in the CBC, our state-funded broadcaster. There was a story with concerns about that very thing, about the weapons we're sending over there possibly ending up in the wrong hands. Not even just now, but after this war is over with. This from a government and a Liberal Party and a New Democrat Party that keeps preaching about gun control. And they want to send all these weapons over to Ukraine. And I'll show you who they're going to end up in the hands of. I think I've still got it up here. Here we go. Hang on just a second. Let me show you. We ran this video the other night, but I've got some stills to reinforce what this is about. This is, these are pictures of that hospital that they said was, or sorry, the theater that was bombed. But we're seeing that there's some questions about that, whether it was actually the Russians or whether it was a false flag staged thing. I don't know. A lot of propaganda, right? But see these yellow flags? That's the Azov group. These are Nazis. And this right here, this was a photo taken in 2015. See those kids? Those kids trained at this summer Nazi camp for children and how to fight. And you know where our weapons have gone? Into the hands of those kids, because some of those kids, I guarantee you, are of age now. They're old enough, and they're out there fighting if they're not already dead. Just so you know, you sent the weapons to those kids. They're a little older now, so they'd be teenagers or, probably around 18, 19 years old would be my estimate. So some of those kids, I bet you, are dead right now because we sent guns over there. And I don't know, maybe not, but we know that's who you're arming. That's who NATO trained directly. We spoke to a couple of military experts over the last couple of weeks who talked about training that exact battalion, NATO. So, if you're cool with sending money and guns to actual Nazis, have at it, I guess. And you'll get more of this. Now, I'm not saying that not sending the guns is going to end this thing. Not at all. I don't know. Oh, did you see that? Oh, I guess I didn't bring that footage up, did you? I'm sorry, you were still looking at the map. I apologize. Let me bring up those photos. I thought they were on the screen. There we go. Are you seeing that? No, still not there. I know why, because that's an overlay. I apologize. Trying to produce and do graphics and talk at the same time. So there's the theater. On the right-hand side, those are Nazi flags from the Azov battalion. Scroll down. We ran that video a couple of nights ago. Same night as the Scott Ritter interview. Those kids right there. That was a summer camp for kids run by the Azov battalion, a Nazi group, now part of the Ukraine military, integrated in. And those kids now, because this was taken in 2015, would probably be about 18 or 19 years old, I think, ish, somewhere in that age range. And that's who you're arming. That's who you sent the weapons to. Don't worry, they're well trained. We showed you the video. They know how to use them. It's sad. It's really sad. What are your kids going to do this summer, I wonder, folks? The world has become a very dangerous place, and it's sad to see kids spending their summers learning warfare tactics and how to survive and how to fight and kill. I learned how to tie knots, and I'm still not very good at it.
There's another angle here that I'd like to bring in, and that is not Victoria Nuland, well, maybe the Canadian equivalent, and that is Freeland, Chrystia Freeland.
Oh yes,
she's Ukrainian, and I was trying to find. I thought I put on my site somewhere a very recent picture of her over in the Ukraine, shaking hands with the person who's head of the Azov Brigade or something like that.
Well, we do have a photo of her right here holding a Banderite banner.
Yeah.
And this, I believe, I think it was in Toronto.
Yeah.
Might have been in Ottawa. I think it was in Toronto. I can't remember now.
The one I was looking for was she was over in the Ukraine when Trudeau took a bunch of MPs over across there for a photo op very recently, and they were in the Ukraine. And there's a photo of her with, and I believe Trudeau's in it, and with this top official. It's very, very clear that there's this close connection to the neo-Nazi group with her.
Yeah, I'm just looking here. I see these. Not sure. We'll try and dig that up for you. I
couldn't find it. Mentally, I can see it, but we might just have to let that one go.
Yeah, for tonight. It would take us a little too long to dig it up. I wasn't prepared for that.
Well, I wouldn't either.
Yeah, but we have shown you those photos of her with that banner and the roots of the Banderite faction. That goes all the way back to Stepan Bandera, who was responsible for many, many deaths, many Jewish deaths. Back in World War II, you had Nazis in Ukraine collaborating with the Germans during World War II. And many of those descendants are still there, and many Nazi groups still active in Ukraine, including the Azov Battalion, which has a lot of political power and military power within the government.
Yeah. And I think the government has made him a hero of the state or something like that.
Yes.
And I believe the figure is closer to 200,000 of Jews, Poles, and Russians that he and his the forces under his command killed.
Brutal.
Yeah.
So again, I'm having a really hard time seeing how we have the moral high ground on this one.
Yeah.
I'm really having a hard time with it.
And I don't know if you remember that as members of NATO, we actually bombed Libya. when NATO went in and blew up Libya and destroyed the most prosperous country in North Africa, and reduced it to rubble and warring tribal factions. Canadian planes were part of the bombing. So we don't have clean hands.
Well, we don't have clean hands even in World War II. CBC did a documentary about carpet bombing that was taking place, and Canadians participated in that. And it was designed to demoralize the Germans. We did do that, and they pulled that documentary because it was too embarrassing for the country and too truthful.
Yeah.
But that's the reality of war. I mean, we sit here and we believe that we did the moral and right thing all the time, but not always. Not always. War is a dirty, dirty thing, and a moral thing all the way around, regardless of what side you're on. People are killed. People are killed, and that's the reality. So I'm just having a really hard time with this whole thing.
And the disgusting thing that gets me are these old politicians in whatever government that send our kids to war. 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds, sometimes even younger kids that fake their age. That's happened in World War I, World War II. And you send them off to get killed. And you sit back in Parliament and you pontificate, but as you say, they're not your kids that are getting slaughtered. And the next war, well, there's a famous quote from Einstein that he was asked, how did he think World War III would be fought? Have you heard that quote? And he said, I don't know, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Yes.
And that's what we're on the verge of. If we send kids over to the Ukraine to fight in the World War III, none of them are coming back, possibly not even in body bags. So, and I have an 18-year-old grandson. So,
yeah, and it is that serious. Mm-hmm. And if this escalates, I don't think people here are nearly scared enough.
No.
Because if this thing does go nuclear, we're going to get it right here. One way or another, the war will be here. So you imagine the CN Tower incinerated. Imagine Toronto freaking gone. Imagine fallout drifting over your city. Imagine you think you've got supply chain shortages now. People will starve to death because everything will be shut down. There will be no infrastructure. There won't be any water. There won't be help coming anytime soon.
Yeah.
Everything will be broken. Everything. There will be looting, rioting. It'll be every man for himself. Society will fall apart. And that's part of what will kill everybody. It's not even just the initial blast. It's the radiation poisoning. It's the starvation afterward. It's the lack of medicines. Supply chains shut down. You can't get, even first aid. The hospitals won't be functioning properly. It'll be.
You won't have any money.
Right.
The amount of cash kept in the vault of your local bank is very small compared to the total deposit base. And most transactions nowadays are electronic. They're done with a credit card, a debit card, done online, whatever. The scenario is, and I don't think I ever told you this story. So my wife and I moved to Southern Ontario, London area, Chatham area, half in between, 5 years ago. And one of the parts of the calculation is I went online and I found an interactive display that all you had to do was put in the coordinates of say a city or any position and specify the size of the nuclear device and whether it was a ground burst or an air burst. And it would give you the map of the different zones, the central zone where nothing survives, and outwards. And so I deliberately chose Southwestern Ontario because if there's a war with Russia and Russia is provoked by Canada, it'll take 2 nukes to put us back in the stage. That's all. One to take out Ottawa and one to take out Toronto. Ottawa takes out all your government services, your Department of Finance, all of your CRA is gone too, so no more tax.
I have one up on the screen here. So what size bomb would you think be dropped on Ottawa?
Let's say 20 megaton.
20 kiloton bomb?
Megaton. Kiloton was Hiroshima. We're talking about megaton now.
Right. So
hydrogen bomb.
So that'd be 20, and that's in kilotons. So that I have to add how many zeros then if it's on top of a kiloton?
3 zeros.
3 zeros. Great. It's 1,000 times more powerful. Surface. You want a surface burst or an air burst? I think probably an air burst, right?
Yeah, that would be the most effective.
Yes. Casualties and radioactive fallout. There it is. So it takes out the entire city of Ottawa, all of Gatineau. And then you get all this fallout is the outer circle, depending on which way the wind blows. So that's Ottawa, Ontario, Canada.
Yeah.
Estimated fatalities, 346,830 people.
See, that's old because the population of the greater Ottawa is now over 1 million.
Right.
And they're all gone.
Yes.
And then one on Toronto, because all of your financial services are in Toronto. You disable the country's financial services, and
that's Toronto.
Yeah.
Takes out the entire city of Toronto, Mississauga, Vaughan, Markham. Gets all the fallout. But Toronto, right up to Scarborough, is basically leveled. And that's not even I don't think that's even the biggest bomb.
No, it's not. No.
So yeah, these estimated fatalities, they're way low because we know the population is much bigger than 346,000.
Oh yeah.
You'd have 1 million people dead.
Yeah. Well, add a factor of 10. Yeah. They're 3, 4, 5 million now in the greater Toronto area.
That's right.
GTA.
That's the reality. And the scary thing, Ian, is I keep seeing all this propaganda right now coming from some left-wing media outlets that are downplaying the possible impact of nuclear weapons. I get Quora is in my email all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I've been seeing these kind of posts in there, and they link to articles. And I've seen experts saying that the worst that would happen is the bombs would only take out military bases. The explosions wouldn't be nearly as big as people think. And all you'd have to do is stay in your house for about a week, and then everything would be okay because the fallout would blow over. So just lock down for a week and it'll be okay. And I'm like horrified because young people,
they're in loony land.
Yes. No, there won't be any freaking food, and entire cities will be blown off the map, off the face of the earth. And just crazy.
There's another way they can go about it, and it could be in coincidence with this, is an EMP attack. And what you do is you explode a high-powered nuclear weapon high in the atmosphere, and it creates an electromagnetic pulse that will take the grid down. It'll burn out, the currents generated will burn out all the transformers on the grid. So the grid will be down for minimum of a month and possibly 6 months. I've seen estimates. But here's the problem. If the grid goes down for a month, civilization ceases in cities. Imagine being in Toronto, living on the 72nd floor penthouse of a lakeshore condo, and suddenly you've got 72 floors or something to walk up and down to go and try and get groceries, except grocery store isn't operating because there's no electricity.
Well, do you remember the 2003 blackout, the great Eastern Seaboard blackout, and we lost all the power here?
Yep.
And that went on. How long did that last? That was better part of a week, as I recall. 4 days, something like that.
Anyways, my recollection is shorter, but
yeah, I remember. It depended on where you were, but I was still working at CTV at the time, and it's a little hard for me to remember because I had to keep going out to a transmitter site where there was a diesel generator, so there was electricity out there. But people were losing their food, their freezers were down. People realized very quickly that without electricity and power, you had a lot of trouble. Like you couldn't even pump gas at a gas station because there was no electricity to run the pumps. Right? So
that's right. No fuel.
Things get very complicated very quickly when you lose your power.
Yeah.
And if you think you're going to tap into your Bitcoin when you can't get your cash after a nuclear explosion, think again, because no, there won't be any internet.
That's right. Yeah.
So, yeah, we're covering some ground that we've covered here in previous broadcasts, of course. So some of this stuff people may have heard. If not, it's because people are new to the channel, which is probable because we keep getting new people every broadcast. But this is absolutely ground that needs to be covered again. And we're getting a slightly different perspective on a lot of this stuff tonight. And it is important because this is the thing that really scares the living daylights out of me. World War III and going nuclear. And I feel like, Ian, we are closer to this than we have ever been before. I keep saying that. And I don't think we're hearing enough of that from our mainstream media, and absolutely none of it from our politicians, our leaders.
And many sources have said that Putin, in desperation, if he's completely cornered, will go nuclear. That as the last means of defense, he will go nuclear. And you don't want to corner, I would say, a wild animal, but except he's not a wild animal, but he like anybody, he can be capable of that. So
yeah,
you've got to take this seriously. If you're wanting to send money to Ukraine to buy bullets and guns and stuff like that, think again of what you're doing.
Yeah, well, the reason it makes really no sense to me at all is because I think that I can see, and I think a lot of people can, a very clear path to peace. They just don't want to go down that road. They just don't want to explore that. For whatever reason, whatever their motivation is, they don't want to even talk about it.
And you can't say that it's the Ukrainian people that are making that decision. It's Zelensky, and he's a Western puppet.
Yeah.
He is not thinking in terms of what's best for his people or his country. He's thinking what his Western puppet masters want.
And when he's standing up in front of, when he's appearing on a Zoom screen in front of the Canadian Parliament and U.S. Congress asking for these weapons, they're telling him to get on the screen to ask for the weapons that they're going to give him. And ask for more than they're going to give him. So they look like they're only giving him some of what he wanted, but in reality, they were giving him exactly what they planned to give him to begin with. It's all a game.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous and dangerous. How scared should we be?
Very.
I've had people say, you know, Rick, you're paranoid. It'll never happen.
Be very scared. Very.
Arena says, yes, Rick, you are right. Thank you. I wish I was wrong. Andre Markovich says, we want freedom. Yeah, that's enough to get you thrown in jail today in Canada. I'm not joking. Don't forget Biden created horror in Afghanistan, left our own behind and endangered everyone, gave away tons of money in armory. America, he's not our president. Yes, that is another thing that made no sense to me at all. Unless you're on the other side. The way that he got out of Afghanistan, got American soldiers killed, ended up leaving all of the weaponry there for your enemy.
Yeah, I think the Taliban had more Apache attack helicopters than all but 3 or 4 militaries in the world.
How do you do that? And
again, people say, well, Biden did this and Biden did that. Biden's challenge every day is to get his diaper on right. He may have been a reasonably intelligent man at one time, but his mental capacity has declined so greatly, and that is very clear anytime they drag him out and put him in front of a camera. You just want to cringe. It's not Biden. When you say Biden, you have to be thinking it's who above Biden is making these decisions, who's pulling the strings, what their motives are. That's the way we need to be thinking.
And I know it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but you have to think it's this deep state controlling everything. That's what it seems like to me, and it seems to go back to the WEF and these globalists, which a certain portion of the U.S. government is part of.
Yeah.
That is in itself chilling. Deb Wirtz says, yeah, it's so messed up. Andre Markovich says, you've just forgot Pearl Harbor. Well, yeah, there are some people who think that they let that happen. Who knows? That was a long time ago. I wasn't alive yet. Biden created horror also in Yugoslavia. And I think it's important to point out as well that the Biden family, up to their eyeballs in corruption in Ukraine, along with a lot of other Western politicians. I've said this before. There's a conflict of interest here. That's one of the reasons, for sure, that these guys are fighting to expel the Russians and preserve what is there. Because that whole country has been a money laundering operation for a lot of very corrupt, rich people and politicians for a long time. Yeah. They don't want the gravy train to end. And I'm sure they don't want any embarrassing information to come out of there that might leak out after the Russians take over. I would think that has to be a danger for them. This whole thing stinks to high heaven. It really, really does. And in the process, and maybe we can talk a little bit about this now, the economic warfare that has been launched by the West on Russia. We're technically not at war, but we are at war with Russia because our governments have imposed all these sanctions, banning Russian oil, taking, banning Russia from the SWIFT payment platform. What are your views on that?
I think ultimately the sanctions are going to hurt the West more than they hurt Russia. Russia's been operating under sanctions. If we go back to Iran has been sanctioned for, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. It's been operating under sanctions for a long time. And it seems to be doing just fine, thank you. And countries learn to survive under sanctions. Russia's been operating under sanctions for a long time. And I am of the mind that Putin didn't just wake up one morning and said, I think I'm going to invade Ukraine, call up the general and say, okay, some boys in. No. This was mapped out in detail. They would have expected these sanctions, perhaps even more sanctions that have already been implemented. They would have, the intelligence community and the military communities in countries, they do tabletop exercises. They stage kind of war games, and they say, okay, well, now if they did this, what would happen? And they bring in all the top minds, and they think about it. So going into this, Putin had a very clear idea. And I don't mean Putin just himself. The people behind him, he has got a unified group of, I'll call them advisors, supporting him. He's not alone on this one, for sure. And they will have factored in all of the things that they could think of that could be done to them and devise strategies on how to deal with it. It's like a bioweapon. You do a gain of function research on a virus to see how bad it can be, so you can build a vaccine against it. So if it ever evolves naturally or artificially, you're ready for it. I think that's the analogy that they've gone through economically. The Chinese may have been caught more off guard than Russia on this, but I understand MasterCard and Visa and American Express cut Russia off. Okay, well, the Chinese have a credit card system. I don't know if it's fully implemented yet or not. The Russians are going to use that. So the people on the street will at least be able to use a credit card. There are all sorts of different ways of getting around payment issues and stuff like that. They've had many years to develop these systems. And frankly, the casualty of this is going to be the American dollar, the hegemony of the American dollar as a reserve currency. That will probably fall as a result of this. It'll be one of the blowbacks that will come on the U.S. in particular. The other thing is that there are many banks in Europe that hold Russian loans. Russia is willing to pay them, but they can't because they've been sanctioned. There's no mechanism allowed for them to pay the loans. So those loans now will go into default. Those banks on their balance sheets now have loans that are inactive, not non-performing, and we could start seeing some banks go down. And the banking system in Europe is quite fragile. It's more highly leveraged than in the U.S., and you could get a domino effect. So we don't know what's going to go on. This is in, I don't know, the third inning in terms of the economic effects. Fertilizer. Russia is one of the major exporters of fertilizer. Well, Brazil can't get fertilizer this year, and I think 80% of their requirement came from Russia. So what's that going to do to their crop yields? Well, down 20%. And knowing that, Brazil may say, okay, we're not exporting any because we need to keep it for our own people. And you're seeing this in other countries. So all of these sanctions, they're really backfiring. And we're only starting to see them ripple through the West.
Yeah, and it seems to me we, as just, the little people, have been thrust into the middle of this conflict, and we're being used as, and I said this the other night, we're like economic cannon fodder. So we're paying higher prices for everything. If the U.S. dollar fails and is no longer the world reserve currency, that will be a disaster for the West. It'll be a disaster for the U.S. and for us. We're toast economically if that happens. Yeah. And so people understand, I'll explain it again. In 1974, Nixon took us off the gold standard, and oil from Saudi Arabia and OPEC countries is all traded in U.S. dollars in exchange for defense. The U.S. promised to provide defense to Saudi Arabia, but in exchange, all oil had to be purchased, traded in U.S. dollars. That props up the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. That's why they refer to it as the petrodollar. But if countries start to trade in other currencies, buy and sell oil in other currencies, then that reduces demand for the U.S. dollar. And there's so many U.S. dollars circulating out there because they printed so much of it, the value will tank. It will collapse the dollar, which it's in danger of collapsing now anyway, because they've been printing it like it's going out of style, especially during the pandemic. And we're pushing Russia away. Now we're, not buying Russian oil. And we're already seeing, and I've been watching some of the newsletters from the oil industry over the past couple of weeks. Some countries are already getting ready to start trading in currencies other than U.S. dollars to buy and sell oil. Yeah. And we've just pushed Russia into the open, waiting arms of China. And so now we have this whole redrawing of the geopolitical map and the economies and the economic alliances that are in play. And we're creating this very hard dividing line. And I think, Ian, and give me your opinion on this, but I think that the West, the United States in this case, may have overplayed its hand again, and severely this time, because I think that they may have shot everyone in the foot with this one. And we may all end up paying a very, very painful price. If the U.S. dollar collapses, everything here is tied to that. The Canadian economy is directly tied to the United States. They go down, that currency collapses. We can't pay for anything. We won't be able to pay for anything.
Well, it'll still be around. It's not going to disappear, but the problem is that it won't be the single world currency, and it may not be the preferred one. Mm-hmm. Russia and China are not natural friends. They have fought wars between themselves. They're just not natural friends, but this has forced them to become, I'll call it practical friends. And Russia extended, I think they built two pipelines from the east in Siberia into China for oil and natural gas. So that's flowing. And as I understand it, China's agreed to take payment in rubles.
Right.
So we already see that. I think what's happened is it's kind of been a learning lesson for China, because China wants Taiwan. They want it back, and they will get it back sooner or later, kind of like Crimea. Taiwan was part of China, and rightfully, by some argument, it belongs to them. So they will try and get it back, but now they've had a chance to see how the world responded to Russia, and they can say, okay, if we move against Taiwan, this is what we will be faced with. Are we prepared to endure this? So they may be hesitating a little bit, but it'll be just marking time until they can make sure they have got the programs in place to handle total economic isolation, which has been thrust on Russia. And they're not going to let Russia go down, because arguably the U.S. is still the greatest military power, but Russia and China, I think, are second or third. I don't know what order. Together, they're probably stronger than the U.S., and China is growing stronger daily. This is another element that we haven't talked about. If Russia is really pressed, what will China do? Because if Russia goes down, then China is alone. And I don't think, and China is not ready to take the U.S. on its own at this point. Now, if Russia goes down in World War III, then it's kind of a moot argument, because nobody's really going to come out of that one ahead.
So it sounds like you're slightly more optimistic than I am. I'm just worried that when houses are already selling here, houses that I think are worth probably, in my mind, maybe $200,000 or $300,000 are selling for $1 million. I went to buy some stuff to do some wiring in my house today, and a bundle of house, like standard copper wire, like $130. And I was like, no, that's worth like $40.
Yeah.
That's 130. Well, that's inflation gone crazy. And if the US dollar collapses and loses even more value and the Canadian dollar follows, those prices are going to go even higher. I just don't know where it stops.
Yeah. I think there are many bubbles, so-called, in the West. There's a bubble in bonds, there's a bubble in stocks, there's a bubble in real estate, and there is a very great risk that all of these bubbles will be popped in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
And you may have your $200,000 house again.
And what do you make of these high gasoline prices and Biden and Trudeau just pointing their finger at Putin and saying, oh, it's all his fault?
It's more of what to do about a population that probably believed them.
Mm-hmm.
They swallowed the Kool-Aid, and that's another whole conversation that comes under the PSYOP category that maybe another time we can have.
Yeah, Shirley Benson says, try buying a new vehicle. Yeah, my son works at a car dealership, and he knows what the industry is like, and he tells me every day that all these dealerships, they can't get inventory. I'm tied in a little bit to the auto industry too, and car dealers, even now after all this time, chips shortages, inventory shortages all the way down the line. New car dealers trying to survive as a new car dealership with only about 10% of the inventory they would normally sell in a year. It's coming to a head.
Yeah.
They're trying to backfill with used vehicles. It's not a good situation. And Russia, again, is a major supplier for a lot of raw materials that go into the manufacture of cars and batteries that are used for electric vehicles. So if
Mhm.
you think that we're just going to replace all the gasoline powered cars with electric cars, in response to what Putin is apparently responsible for, well, that might not work out as
Yeah.
as well as you think either.
Now, here's something that's stunned the markets in the last 2 weeks. The price of nickel went from, I don't know, I'm going to say $35 a ton to, I don't know, 150. It increased sixfold. It the commodity exchange in which nickel futures are traded and nickel is traded on, they went nuts. And it's because Russia is a major supplier of nickel, platinum, and palladium. And what goes into your catalytic converters? Platinum or palladium. I mean, those are just a few of the ones that are critical. Titanium. Russia's a big exporter of titanium, and that goes into a lot of things nowadays because it's lightweight and strong. So this whole supply chain disruption is just going to be magnified, ripple through the economy.
And it's interesting because all of these things start to connect. Pandemic, war in Ukraine, supply chain shortages. It just goes down the line. All these things. It's almost like a lot of it was planned.
Oh, heavens. You think there would be people around that would do that kind of thing?
I can't imagine.
You're very cynical, Rick. I'm amazed.
Oh. And with that being said, this just brings something to mind. Tomorrow in Ontario, isn't tomorrow the day that the mask mandate ends?
Yes, it is.
So you can go into places without a mask tomorrow. So
yes.
Tomorrow or the next day?
Tomorrow, I believe.
Okay.
That means now I can go into the beer store and the Canadian Tire.
Yeah.
I haven't worn a mask through the whole thing.
Yeah, well, I went into Canadian Tire. I didn't put a mask on.
Well, the one here, it's up to the individual store, I think, and they took exception early on, and so I just boycott them.
Yeah, I try to avoid places that have been hardline on the masks and so on.
Yeah.
Some places I will never go back ever, for sure. Some stores absolutely won't go back ever.
Yeah, exactly.
That being said, do you think what's your prediction for tomorrow? Will people keep wearing them, or will people?
There are people that have been so psychologically damaged that they will not be able to go in public without a mask on. They will feel so insecure. There'll be a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
Eventually, some of them will maybe I'll try it. And, I'm still alive. Oh, maybe it'll be okay. But there'll be some. It's sad what's being done to our population with this COVID fear, which was entirely unnecessary. And that's another thing we could go into sometime if you ever want to.
Yes, I'd like to actually bring you back in for that special broadcast on the COVID discussion and the Pfizer documents when that happens.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be great to have you involved in that. I'd like to get a few key people involved and have that discussion, but not directly on YouTube. They don't deserve us.
No, if it's going to be useful, it has to be on other territory.
That's right. That's right.
I'm a fan of Rebel News as a subscriber, but in the last few months, it's hardly worth watching on YouTube because you get halfway into it, and I'm sorry now, we've got some really good stuff to tell you, but we can't. Go up, switch over to Rumble or BitChute or wherever you are.
Yeah, and that being said, I'm a big Rebel News fan. I think Ezra Levant is a Canadian hero. I love the work they do. I think there are a lot of independent journalists and media outlets out there right now that are picking up the slack and doing the job that the mainstream media just isn't.
Yep.
And I encourage you all to seek them out and support all of them because they're all doing great work. And I'll get this shameless plug in here for us right now.
Yeah.
If you can support us, you can donate at freedomreporters.com. Some of those streamers, other streamers and independent journalists have been on here with us as well. And you can support us and our work at freedomreporters.com or click the hot link in the YouTube and Facebook descriptions or over on Rumble. And if you can't do that, please subscribe and share this out. Tell other people about what we're doing. We're trying to get you different perspectives, different information to get you closer to the truth. And thanks to people like Ian, I think we're doing just that. And Ian, I do want to talk a little bit tonight as well about the Peoples Convoy that's going on just outside Washington, D.C., and they kind of drive in around the Beltway and stuff.
Okay.
But before we do that, is there anything else you'd like to add about Ukraine, or can you give us kind of a summary of your thoughts before we move on to this other topic?
Oh gosh. It ain't what the media is telling you it is. And if that catches you at all, then start digging in the independent media that Rick is talking about and many independent sources. Yeah. I mean, I follow 20, 30 different sites and sources to get my information from, and none of it has CBC or CTV or Global in the URL. So in fact, I was watching a guy in one of my sources in a repartee kind of like this, and he said, well, when I visit my mother and she turns on the CBC, I have to immediately leave the room before I throw up. And that's kind of the way I feel too. So
yeah, and I can tell you, I worked at CTV for over 25 years, and
you didn't even recognize it now.
No. I mean, it was starting when I was there, and that's why I left.
Yeah,
I couldn't be part of it. I was having more and more trouble. I couldn't understand, honestly, why I kept having such running into such friction with in the editorial meetings in the mornings. It just seemed to get worse over time.
Yeah.
And now that I'm out, I understand very well why. And it was because it was really the cancer had become malignant and was just infecting everything. And
so that's 2 points. One, do your own digging, dig deeper. And second, don't underestimate the risk. And I would leave it with that. So thank you very much, Rick. I enjoyed this. This is a lot of fun.
Can I get you to stick with me for a little bit longer and just give me
I thought I was being dismissed.
No, not at all. I want your views because I know that you value freedom and you're a freedom fighter and a freedom reporter. Okay. Before I show I'll tap into this live feed from Hagerstown Speedway, where all these truckers are staged. We go there every night and show people just what's happening at Hagerstown Speedway. But what was your impression of what happened, especially in Ottawa? Start there, because that was something that I've never seen anything quite like that. Never seen anything like that in Canada before.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, one of the things that impressed me was that as the convoy progressed, you got the videos, no, not on mainstream TV. You had to go to alternate sources. A lot of this came out on YouTube. Individuals standing beside the road with their cell phone camera up, recording it, and then putting it on YouTube. And it was just everywhere the convoy passed, the roads were lined with people, men, women, children, all cheering, waving them on, waving flags, overpasses crowded with people cheering and waving flags right into Ottawa. And it continued on that way in Ottawa. And it was like a big party until they brought in the siege engine. This was the device they brought in to overthrow Parliament with. And it was otherwise known as a castle. What was that?
The bouncy
Bouncy
castle
castle.
for the kids. Yeah.
Putting that in front of Parliament, that was the biggest threat posed to Trudeau right there. But it captured the spirit of it. And that was the thing that got me was, and many people were reported in saying, for the first time, I felt some hope. And I will say that for me, that was the thing that I felt. For the first time in a long time, I felt some hope for Canada. Pass.
Yeah, I think that was what we heard. That was a common thing that we were hearing from a lot of Canadians, that it was the first hope they'd had in 2 years.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a national moment.
It was.
A point of national pride, something that could have gone down in the history books as a milestone for Canadians.
It'll be historic in the history books. It will be a historic moment. And there is a word that I want to use here that I have not used on anything I've posted yet, and that is these truckers and the organizers are true patriots. They are patriots. Yeah. Remember that.
And the thing that I found disturbing yesterday was there was a worldwide rally for freedom. So, of course, there were, demonstrations in cities all over Canada and all over the world. And so in London, Ontario, the cops showed up with snow plows to block roads, to prevent vehicles, trucks, and or cars from getting into certain areas of the downtown. They had at many times more cops there than protesters because they had to shut them down. In Calgary, the police chief has now resorted to calling freedom protesters anti-democracy protesters. He, on Friday, managed to get a court injunction limiting what protesters, freedom protesters, mind you, are allowed to do. So they are not allowed to block roads. They are not allowed to block sidewalks in the parks. So they have to limit their protesting to a certain area within the city park. They are not allowed to use any kind of amplification for like PA systems for speeches or anything like that. So, and I know that he wanted more than that. And we ran an interview that he did with Global on the program yesterday. And I found his rhetoric disturbing, one-sided, political. I'm concerned with the way our police services are being politicized and weaponized against the political opponents, Justin Trudeau's political opponents. And I think that the cops don't, Ian, I've never seen anything like it where we used to have a community-based policing system across the country that was community oriented. And I mean, that was a philosophy of policing and an approach to policing. Now we have a progressive policing system and a system that seems to be at the beck and call of politicians. I find it very disturbing Unprecedented, I think, in Canadian history. And I don't think Canadians understand or even recognize what's going on in that regard. Do you have any thoughts, or do you want to reflect on that at all, especially in light of the violent approach police took in Ottawa to move those peaceful protesters out?
I was going to write a series of 3 posts on this, and I will finish one. Another one I was going to write on would be titled "The Birth of the Police State," and that's the way I saw it. This is a police state in operation. The Ottawa police chief, not the original guy, the colored guy who resigned or got fired, or whatever happened to him.
Peter Slawley, yeah.
But the guy who came in afterwards, he was a real Nazi. You know, I saw one interview, and he said he was asked about negotiation, and he said, "Yeah, something to the effect. What was it? Yeah, we negotiated, told him to get out." I mean, that's it.
Yeah. Steve Bell is the interim chief's name, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That rings a bell now, yes.
The problem I'm seeing is that's the theme across the country right now.
Well,
most police chiefs are striking that same tone.
It's the Calgary police force that has locked up the Calgary pastor,
Arthur Pavlovsky.
Pavlovsky. He's been over 35 days in solitary confinement and not charged, as I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a free democratic society. You need to rethink your illusions if you still hold that one.
That scares me. Again, all of this stuff seems to tie back into everything. You know, we say we're over in Ukraine fighting for freedom, but all this stuff is going on here. We hear all this doublespeak from Justin Trudeau. We have censorship legislation in Parliament making its way through. We already have anti-hate speech legislation, which is really legislation designed to allow the government to target political opponents and throw people in jail for crimes that go against a political narrative, really. Yeah. And now we have, I think it's Bill C-67 in Ontario, which is going to be implemented in the school systems here, which makes basically thought crimes something that can have you thrown out of your job and possibly thrown into jail as well. It's also supposed to be an anti-racism bill, but it is nothing of the sort. It's really just it's a piece of legislation that allows someone to anonymously accuse you of having wrongthink and getting you fired and even charged criminally with no due process. Yeah. You don't even get to face your accusers, as I understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is what's happening in Canada right now. That's why I've been saying we don't have much time left. Our freedom is what is left of it. There isn't much, but what is left is going to be taken away from us very, very quickly. You can see it. I think we've only got a matter of months.
Yeah. An observation that I've made is that and this probably belongs in a different conversation, but the vaccine passport, all of the jurisdictions said, okay, we're taking it down. We're not implementing. I don't know. I can't think of a good terminology for it. Discontinuing it, whatever.
Sure.
What they didn't say is we're also going to destroy the programs that we implemented it with and delete all the data in the database behind it. Those are still in place. This was a test run for the society that is being rolled out in which you will have a digital ID. And this was a test case for a digital ID under the guise of something for a fake pandemic, but still, they know it works. All they have to do is take the programming and say, okay, well, apart from medical ID information, we're going to include all your financial information now. That takes a programmer, half a day to code all of that in. And we're going to include a social credit score, what we think of you as a person in terms of your behavior and things like that. So now you've got a digital ID ready to roll out. Literally, it's on the shelf. They've tested it. It works. Mm-hmm. Then you look at the Emergency Act. Governments can manufacture an emergency every day of the week if they want one. And we saw what could be done under that. And it probably even surprised the government and what they could do with it. And they quickly pulled it back. Now, did they say, oh, this is legislation that's too dangerous? We're passing legislation to retract it. No, it's just back on the shelf. This worked. Okay, we know how to use it next time. This is all practice. It works, and it will be used in a coordinated fashion when they have a larger plan ready to roll out in its entirety. And that's within the next 2 years, and possibly within the next year.
Yes, and it seems to me there's a bit of a bait and switch going on, or a shell game, where they're saying, "Oh yes, we're getting rid of the mask mandates and the digital passports. We're not going to do that." But in Ontario and in this province and over here, they're still rolling out a digital ID system, and they're just going to coordinate all this information through that. And a lot of these other restrictions, like air travel, train travel, they're all still in place. So if you're not vaccinated, you still can't get on a train. You still can't get on a plane. And that's why when Calgary's police chief sat there and said that he doesn't understand why these protesters don't just go home. Their demands are incoherent. The mandates are all being taken down anyway, but they still keep on protesting. And I don't even understand. You can't even understand what they want, because we thought that these protests would end with the mandates being dropped, but they're not. They're not going home. So we're just going to have to seek reasonable limits on their protests, he said. Well, he doesn't get it. It's because they take them away over here, but they put them back in over there, and they're already talking about maybe bringing them back in the fall, the ones that they're, easing off over here. So, and the financial tools that were imposed to freeze bank accounts during the invocation of the Emergencies Act, those measures are like in place forever now. They didn't get rid of those. The Emergencies Act was revoked, but that aspect of it now remains in place. So they can use that anytime they want now.
So consider this scenario, and this is pretty close to fact. A trucker is arrested, taken down to the Elgin Street Courthouse, held for a while. In the meantime, his bank accounts are frozen, all his credit cards are frozen, his vehicle insurance is canceled, so he can't drive his truck, but he doesn't even know where his truck is because it's being hauled off somewhere. And after a few hours, they say, okay, you'll have to come back for a court hearing, but you're free to go. They put him out on the sidewalk. He's got $5 in his pocket. He's got enough for a cup of coffee. He doesn't have money for supper. He doesn't have money for any place to stay that night. He's got nothing. He can't go to his truck. He doesn't know where his truck is, and if he did, doesn't have a taxi fare to get there. The guy is, at that point, he's dead. Unless some soul comes along and says, well, let me give you a hand. Would you like to come over for supper until we can get something straightened out or something? But otherwise, his days are numbered because he can't eat. He has no shelter. He's got nothing. Right. And they can do that with this system with any individual in Canada. And the problem is with a lot of people watching this, is you're going to say, oh, that wouldn't happen to me. Well, you just wait.
That's right.
So,
and I mean, I hope this isn't interpreted the wrong way, but I think our politicians and our police have been very lucky that they've been dealing with the people they've been dealing with so far. I think they should count themselves extremely fortunate because honestly, they've been freaking assholes all the way along. Excuse my language, but they have been.
Yeah.
They've been complete a-holes to Canadians.
Mm-hmm.
The Prime Minister declared war on his own people, on his truckers, on farmers, on peaceful people who came to wave Canadian flags because they're patriots and Justin Trudeau is not.
Yeah.
They're lucky that they're dealing with Christians who are peaceful, church-going people, conservatives, people who believe in the rule of law, and people who thought that the cops were on their side because they thought the cops were there to protect them and keep the peace and do the right thing, do the right things, and serve the people. I got news for you. The cops are not on your side. The cops are just there collecting a paycheck, doing what they're told.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are mercenaries, as we saw in Ottawa, hired goons who come in to make their overtime, crack a few skulls, go home and drink some brewskis with their fellow boys and girls in blue, and count their overtime pay, and don't think twice about it because that's the way some of them are. Others, well, we've seen what happened to a few who do think for themselves, who lost their jobs. But for the most part, a cop is not your friend. Cop is just there. They're a soldier following an order, and that's it. And that they might, I think that the days of cops being your friend are long gone. I remember in kindergarten, community police officer coming in, sitting there, and I was scared. I was scared because this big guy with handcuffs, right? And I don't know if you want to hear my kindergarten story, but he said, "Who wants to come and try the handcuffs on?" And I was the only kid who put up my hand. I went up. He said, "Well, you're very brave." I went up. Of course, the thing wouldn't even clamp down on my wrist because the handcuffs were too big for me. But his message was, a police officer is always your friend. You don't need to be afraid of a police officer. You know what? After that, I never was until now. And I'm sorry to say that. In the other room, I have, Ian, I'll bring it out another night. I have a big award from Crime Stoppers for the work that I did through the media with police. Always worked great with police, great relationships with police. I don't trust any of them anymore. That's how bad it is. You lose me, you lose my trust, you've got a big problem. Because I thought I'd be the last guy that would ever be afraid of the cops in this country. But my God, after what I've seen, after the way I've been treated out there by the cops, after the fines that I've seen levied against some of my friends who don't deserve it at all, after the way they've treated business owners, after the way that I've seen cops wrestle kids to the ground for skating outside on a creek, for tackling a mother at a park, for taking her kids down a slide. I'm sorry, man. I don't trust the cops anymore, and it's going to take a long time and a lot of work to rebuild those bridges and mend those fences and rebuild the public trust, as far as I'm concerned. As far as I'm concerned, we've got a bunch of goons out there who don't think, aren't given any latitude or discretion anymore, and are threatened with job loss if they don't get out there and crack the skulls when they're told to do it.
Yeah.
And these police chiefs, including a police chief right here in my hometown, who I know personally, and I'll call him out because he's used the same damn rhetoric, and he should be ashamed of himself, Gary Kahn. You need to be a leader. You need to stand up for your people. And if you can't do it, you need to get out of the job. Every one of them, every one of these police chiefs across the country, every single one of them. You talk like that Calgary police chief did. You act like Steve Bell does in Ottawa. You have no business in policing. You're not a cop. You're a goon because you're biased, you're politicized, and you've allowed your police service to be weaponized by politicians, and it's entirely inappropriate. And in a free democratic society, you need to apply the law equally, not pick and choose which groups you're going to enforce the law against, which ones you're going to crack down on, which ones you're going to go for court injunctions against because of their political views. You need to learn to keep your politics, or the politics of the politicians, out of your policing. And you're not doing it. And it's damn dangerous. Damn dangerous. That's my 2 cents for tonight. If you can support our work, go to freedomreporters.com, because I have a lot more to say in the days and the weeks and the months ahead, and they're not going to shut me down. They can censor me. They can take this channel off YouTube. I don't give a damn. I'll print flyers. I'll write magic markers on pieces of Bristol board and carry them around town if I have to. But one way or another, I'm going to publish and tell people what I think, because I made a decision a couple of months ago that I was coming back. I'm back because there's a need to get the word out and open dialogue again and defend free speech and freedom in this country. And that's damn well what I'm going to do, because these politicians and these police officers need someone to hold them accountable, because that's what the media in a free democratic society is supposed to do. That's the job of the media, not to sit there and cheerlead the cops, not to sit there and cheerlead when you want to go to war. It's to ask hard questions and look out for the best interests of the public. That's what the media is supposed to be doing. And the media in this country is bought and paid for, and they're not doing it. Well, we're going to do it here, and I've got a lot more to say. So if you want to hear that, if you want to support what we're doing, go to freedomreporters.com and donate, or at least subscribe and get over to Rumble, to the free speech platforms, because that's where you're going to hear all of it. You're only going to hear some of it on these other platforms. That being said, Ian, there's video, live feeds right now, unedited, uncensored. And that's part of what we do here too, is give people as much uncensored, raw video as we can so that people can see for themselves what's really going on. Not edited, filtered, censored crap from the mainstream media. That's a lot of what we did out of Ottawa too, to make sure people got the real picture, right? Well, there it is for you, laid right out. What do you think of what these guys are doing? They were inspired by the Canadian truckers. Now they're down there putting it on the line. Some of these guys have sold off their 401ks so that they can be there for the long haul. Do you think that what they're doing is making a difference? And will they achieve what they have set out to do? I ask you.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't followed it. So I don't know. The Canadian convoy had a very specific objective. I don't know what the American objective was. I don't know if they're achievable, if they're under discussion. I noted I think it was the Senate sat down with some of the truckers to talk with them.
Yeah, Ted Cruz met with them. Senator Ron Johnson.
Something more
Jim
than
Jordan met with them. Some other politicians have met with them.
Yeah, but something that our glorious leader couldn't do.
Yes.
So I'm just very following it very peripherally. So I won't try and comment on it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to see exactly where all this is going down there in the U.S. They keep driving around the Beltway. I know that there was an effort made, and it's been hard for me today because we were so busy here setting up this phone system and everything, to get in touch with some of our contacts down there today at Hagerstown Speedway and with them as they were driving around the Beltway. I did catch a little bit of what was going on, but the cops have been taking sort of some lessons that they've learned, if you will, from the cops up here. And they're blocking exits and to prevent trucks from going right into DC. Some of them actually did get around some of those police barricades, not by going around the barricades, but they found other routes in somehow. So there's been a little bit of action down right in Washington, D.C., but they haven't blocked roads or done anything like that. They continue to be entirely peaceful, and they've been entirely lawful, which is the strategy that they've been employing. They're just trying to make their presence known.
Yeah.
So, that's it. I think that's been one of the keys to the success of the entire movement is keep it entirely peaceful. Exhibit love, right? Show what it's like to be a Canadian, or in this case, a patriotic American. And that's been a key thing through all of this. And yet we still had all these people arrested. The cops came in and got violent. And then the media gives us this opposite spin where they blame it on the truckers and portray them as terrorists, domestic terrorists. It's pretty insane. It's crazy. So I'm not sure where this is all going. But even yesterday, we saw down here with the People's Convoy, a Tesla was darting in and out of the convoy as it was making its way around the Beltway, because they haven't gone right into DC. So they've been driving around the Beltway, and it's so big that they now have enough trucks to do a full lap around. And the first trucks, by the time they get around, they actually are seeing at the starting point, the other trucks on the other side. So they overlap going in both directions all the way around the Capitol. But this Tesla was darting in and out and slamming on the brakes, trying to cause an accident. And they boxed him in, called the cops, and the cops showed up and they let the guy go. Even though they had it on video, showed what he was doing, they still let the guy go. Because why? They blamed the truckers. Again, and I saw the video. We ran a little bit of it here, and they said, "Well, we thought you said to the cops, we thought you guys were on our side. We always supported you." Give your head a shake. You got to learn, folks. The cops are not on your side.
That's right.
They're not. Doesn't mean they're your enemy. I'm not saying that, but they're not there to be on your side.
I think it starts with your government. You first of all understand that your government is not on your side. Your government is your enemy, and if you think differently, you're drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I don't know if it's safe or even appropriate to say the government is your enemy, because that'll get you thrown in jail. but they're not on your side either, really.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Or maybe or correct me if I'm wrong. Is the government our enemy?
Maybe. Because they're playing a hand that isn't on the table.
Yeah.
And I will say, yes, they are our enemy. And that's a long argument to try and support that one, which I won't go into, but that's my viewpoint.
Yeah, but you may be right. I just want to make it clear to anyone listening out there who might be coming here to arrest us right now.
Revolutionary.
Yeah, Ian is not suggesting that we stage a coup d'état, or anything of the sort. That's not what he's getting at here, folks. He's just suggesting.
Yes.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you go ahead.
Evaluate everything that your government tells you, sift it for truth. But the police is beholden to is at the government's command. So whatever you say about the police is coming from the government. It starts at the top. So as for the police, there are a lot of good police out there. I would suggest that young people are going to have to think twice about considering whether they want to do a career in law enforcement or not, because the direction things are going, you may be in a position where you might become acutely uncomfortable if you have any kind of moral principle. On the other hand, if you're a bully, it might be just the career for you. And the problem is authority, obedience to authority. And all of the good cops out there now, I'm sure at some point are wrestling with this. And I think they have to think about, well, is there another career that I might want to migrate into? Because I don't see a good future for policing in Canada in terms of an upright moral authority.
Yes. And I think that's what my heart is heavy, Ian, because of it. These are dark days for Canada. I've been saying that I think the country is lost. I think Canada is gone. If we may get it back, but we're going to have to fight peacefully to get it back. I think it's already gone, and it's only going to get worse from everything that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to let it go without a fight. That's why I'm here.
Nor am I.
Yeah. I know that for sure. You've been there over the last 2 years with a bunch of us.
Yeah.
And I appreciate everything you've been doing. Always a voice of wisdom. Ian Nunn. I appreciate everything that you've done over the last couple of years with us, and everything that you've said and done tonight. I have a great appreciation and respect for you. Really, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Can't say enough good things about the work you've been doing. And let's bring up your website one more time for folks so they can find you. I'll let you do the honors and tell people where they can find you and what they'll find when they get there.
Okay, well, my website is simply thepoog.com, and I stand for truth, finding truth, and promulgating truth, and that's the fundamental principle guiding the work that I do on my website. And just for a bit of amusement, if you're wondering what POOG is, it's an acronym which I actually saw in the Ottawa Citizen many years ago and have never been able to find a direct reference to. It stands for Pissed Off Old Guy.
Is that what it stands for? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You see, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's just perfect.
It kind of describes it too. So
I love that.
Yeah, so that's where I can be found. There is contact information if you want to get in touch with me. I am not on social media. I am not on Facebook. I may have a Twitter account, but I've never done a tweet. Wouldn't know how to. I'm not on any of the other social media platforms. So I'm a technological dinosaur, I guess you might say, and very conscious of privacy. I don't understand Facebook users, quite frankly. So
Well, I wondered what the poog was. I never thought much about it, not enough to even ask you. But now I'm glad you told me that, because at least now I'm smiling for
Oh, yeah.
at the end of the broadcast, right? So there's a little levity there.
Yeah,
That's
it is.
hilarious. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Well, thank you
The
much
pissed off old
for
guy.
having me on, Rick. I enjoyed this thoroughly. I hope some people have gotten some benefit from it. I don't know if I've pissed a bunch of people off or not. We'll find out. I guess you'll.
No, you know what? Well, let's just see here before you go. I bet you about a bunch of people are going to be saying thank you, Ian.
Yeah.
If you like Ian, tell him right now before he goes. Oh, there's so many freaking comments. I can't get through them all. I can't even get to the end here. I already saw some people.
Oh, okay. Well,
Oh, here, see, I'm a pissed off old girl.
yeah.
Pissed off old gal here. This one, see? Yeah, see, I told you, man, they love you. You're among friends here for sure. We like Ian. There you go.
I'm trusting all of you watching are, I would say, my friends on my side, on the same page of the same book that I'm reading from. Put it that way.
Yes, that's right. And there you have it, folks. That brings tonight's broadcast to a very cheerful end.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we're smiling and laughing, at least at the end of this one. And again, one more time, if you can donate, do so at freedomreporters.com. Hot link in the YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble descriptions. I put the URL, the link to the Rumble channel, in the chats for everybody. And within the next few days, we're going to have this phone system working so we can put some voices to some names, which will be great to kind of get everybody more integrated. And thank you, everybody, for watching. I'm going to throw it over to Ian one last time. Oops. That way everything's opposite. To say goodbye, and then we're going to wrap up for the night.
And an expression from the 60s, keep on trucking.
There you go. Ian Nunn, great researcher. Go to the Poog, thepissedoffoldguy.com, thepoog.com. Check out his work. Thousands of hours of research there. He does great work, great website. You'll find it very enlightening, I think is the right word. There you go. And I'm Rick Walker. You are watching the Freedom Reporters on the Maverick News Channel. We are the antivirus program for your mind. Catch you all tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are going to have, one last thing. We're going to have CPC leadership candidate Joseph Burgo on tomorrow night. So tune in for that. 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Same bat time, same bat station.